Introduction to the iron-blooded hero of the beacon fire. A retired mercenary travels across the battlefield, facing a national crisis. All he can do is fight to the end with blood. Chapter 1. Crossing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In October of the 26th year of the Republic of China, Yongxing village was located in the west of Xinkou, Shaanxi province, north of Dabashui. The sunshine in northern Shaanxi shines through the lingering smoke and swaying white clouds, reflecting the earth stained red with blood. The once lush and canopy-like trees on the earth have been destroyed by gunfire, leaving only scattered charred and bare wooden stakes stubbornly standing, exuding a strong and desolate atmosphere. The smoke has not completely dissipated, and the surrounding air is filled with a strong smell of gunpowder that cannot be dissipated for a long time. In the air, there is also a nauseating smell of blood and corpse. Surrounded by grassy green corpses scattered in all directions, some of them were separated, some had missing limbs and broken legs, some were shattered into flesh and mud, some were brainwashed and burst, and there were occasional charred thick tree stumps hanging with broken limbs and arms. Near several bullet pits on the flat ground, more than 10 twisted and charred corpses lay crooked. Between the endless open land and the desolate fields in the distance, there are piles of accumulated corpses, flesh and blood, limbs, scattered firearms, supplies, fallen horses on the open ground. A pool of black-purple blood had solidified, with wet and sticky scraps of meat mixed with loess, mud, and weeds. There were also tank tracks that were indistinguishable in shape and neatly recessed into the ground, embedded with terrifying mud and various broken weapons and equipment. The crooked military flag lay horizontally in the pile of corpses, and the fragments of the blue sky and white sun flag, which had been burned into ashes, drifted with the breeze like fallen leaves, carrying sparks. They flew up in mid-air, exploded, and shattered into tiny particles stained with blood mist, turning into dust, merging with gunpowder and blood mud. Only a few low hovering dove birds were wailing eerily, only the mournful death. A dead silence in the pile of corpses. A pair of anxious and curious eyes were turning left and right. He Wei, who used to be a rookie mercenary, still couldn't accept the fact that he was hit by a car on his way back from retirement and ended up in a terrifying pile of corpses. He also had to accept the fact that he was likely the only one in the pile, a whole living person. What exactly is going on? Although He Wei tried his best to remain calm, his trembling lips and wandering eyes still betrayed his inner self. He Wei lay on the ground with his face facing the ground. A corpse with half of its head and right leg knocked off was lying on He Wei's body, in close contact with him. The dry brain and blood stained the steel helmet on He Wei's head, and the blue sky and white sun badge on the left side of the helmet was stuck by a lump of unknown human body parts. On top of the body lying on He Wei's body, there were scattered military dry food bags and leftover cloth, as well as a bunch of cooked fried rice mixed with minced meat. The grass-green National Revolutionary Army uniform was soaked in blood, dried, and tightly adhered to He Wei's skin. The foul smell in the air, the soil soaked in blood, and the burnt smell blew into his mouth and nose with the gentle breeze. Everything around him was being tested and tormented. At the same time, waves of unfamiliar memories were rushing into He Wei's brain. He Wei began to try to feel the environment he was about to face. He slowly lifted his head. Just as he did, he saw a corpse lying flat in front of him. Fortunately, this corpse was much better than the one on his back. At least, his body was intact and his head was not blown out. All around were open spaces, and almost everywhere He Wei could see were corpses and severed arms, as well as many good and bad firearms. To his right was a bolt-action rifle, with a dark body and dark green gun strap, exuding an ancient atmosphere but also a simple and murderous aura. The wind blew, and another smell of corpse filled He Wei's nose from the ground, almost making people lose their rational thinking ability. The body in front of He Wei had 2 long-handled grenades inserted into his waist belt, and one was hanging from the hanging rope and cloth strip on each arm. The leaked dark green military water bottle and a canvas bullet belt were wrapped together, tightly held by the body's right hand. There is also a skewed piece of cloth on the right chest of the corpse, which is lifted up and swayed left and right with the gentle breeze, appearing to be something like a chest badge. He Wei carefully reached out his hand and pulled the badge over, sniffing the smell of blood and corpses. He carefully examined the small badge in his hand, and found that the item he brought was soaked in blood and couldn't see its original color. However, the shape and text on it were still visible. On the left side of this badge is a rectangular piece embroidered with 2 triangular cloth blocks and 2 vertical bars, resembling military ranks. On the right side and behind the badge, there are 3 rows of black characters on a red background, mixed with traditional Chinese characters. Team 7, 5, Brigade 8, 2, Division. He Wei silently read. The things he could read were completely nonsensical. What a bird thing! He Wei cursed in his heart. He remembered that a long time ago, it seemed that writing began with the right side, so he immediately reread it. This time, at least the words of the person were spoken. The first line on the front of the badge reads, 28th Brigade of the 10th Division of the Army, and the next line reads, 4th Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment, Squad Leader, Li XX, worn by the Republic of China for the 26th year. At the back of the badge, there are also words written. Not afraid of death, not greedy for money, loving the country, loving the people, and implementing a household registration system. Seeing these words, as well as the inexplicable memories in his mind, He Wei gradually understood what he had encountered. It is obvious that I have traveled, and I have traveled to a certain national army, but unfortunately, my current situation is not good. In the 26th year of the Republic of China, wouldn't that be 1937 AD? It happened to be during the anti-Japanese War. The body in front of him instantly gained a sense of respect from He Wei. Putting down his badge, He Wei eagerly lowered his head again, lifted his body slightly, and tugged at his badge. On the left side of the badge was a blue background with a copper triangle, while on the right side was a row of serial numbers. It appears to be the rank of 2nd Lieutenant in the National Army. He Wei, a 2nd Lieutenant trainee officer in the 1st Platoon of the 6th Platoon of the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment of the 28th Brigade of the 10th Division of the Army. He Wei silently recited. 2nd Lieutenant Apprentice. It seems that I have traveled to a probationary officer with the same name and surname as myself. Looking at the number, the 10th Division. It seems like he's still a Central Army. Almost all the visible corpses around were dressed in the same military uniform as He Wei. Considering various circumstances, it is likely that these Chinese soldiers who sacrificed their lives were ambushed or covered in firepower before they were fully deployed. As for the numerous ruts and flattened human flesh on the open ground, apart from being caused by tank tracks colliding and crushing, He Wei couldn't think of any other possibility. Pa! He Wei was still immersed in his thoughts when suddenly a crisp sound followed a gust of wind. After a crisp sound, He Wei's face was covered in blood and blood. A bullet accurately hit He Wei's head, rubbing against his helmet and hitting the dead head on his back. Now, the body's remaining half-pulled head was gone. After the bullet passed through the half-pulled head, it hit the ground diagonally along the twisted trajectory. With a metallic collision sound, it pierced through an unknown German steel helmet on the ground. There was a shooting. Chapter 2. Enemy Traces. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The shooting immediately pulled He Wei back from his thoughts. He Wei quickly stopped all movements, lowered his head, and lay motionless on the ground. The wind of the first bullet piercing through the air was particularly in He Wei's ear, and another shot came. He Wei's eyes suddenly shook, and this second bullet hit the thigh of the corpse in front of him. A blood column touched He Wei's face again. In a short moment, He Wei's face was washed twice by his brain and blood. After the gunshots, faint voices came. He Wei tried to lift his head and quickly and carefully looked into the distance. In front of him was a large open area, and at first glance, He Wei couldn't find anything. The eerie situation made him feel goosebumps on his back. The two shots fired at oneself were spaced less than 3 times apart. If there was only one person, it was impossible to shoot with a bolt-action rifle so quickly. In other words, at least 2 shooters were attacking oneself. And just now, He Wei was discovered by someone just by carefully holding a chest badge, which shows the shooter's solid tactical literacy and ability to search for enemies. At this moment, one must not panic. He Wei continued to observe, and suddenly, a small black dot appeared in front of him, gradually approaching him, evading from side to side and charging towards him. Finally, He Wei saw 3 small black spots in total, about 300 meters away, constantly shooting and quickly approaching him, probably moving in a low position, avoiding, and shooting towards his position. He Wei knew that he had encountered at least 3 enemies with excellent combat skills and shooting skills, and their contours gradually became clear. It's the Japanese army. 3 Japanese soldiers were fiercely attacking, getting closer and closer. A gentle breeze blew by, and for some reason, it was October, but it made He Wei shiver, as if in the midst of the cold winter of March 9. He Wei knew that it was fear. Suddenly crossing through, his soul was still in shock, and he was about to encounter another life-and-death disaster. How could he not be afraid? Damn it! He Wei knew very well that there was not much time left for him, and wasting an extra second would add another danger to himself. Perhaps due to the influence of the marching movements, the shooting accuracy of the 3 Japanese soldiers during the march was not as high as the previous 2 shots. The several bullets that were fired one after another either flew over He Wei's head or hit both sides of He Wei. Under the influence of attack tactics and actions during the charge, the Japanese army could not always maintain high accuracy in shooting. Taking advantage of the safety at this moment, He Wei pushed the body that had been shot on his back to one side, and his back suddenly relaxed. Whew! He Wei took a deep breath and his heart calmed down a lot. Pushing off the body behind him, the pressure on He Wei's back suddenly decreased, and the strength in his hands increased significantly. The bloody and foul-smelling air seemed less unbearable. The situation is overwhelming. If we don't get rid of these 3 monkeys, we will have to lose our own lives in at most 2 minutes. The current situation forces He Wei not to make any buffering. Now, we must take down these 3 Japanese soldiers. He Wei tried his best to remain calm, wiped away the brain and blood from his face, and quickly inspected the available equipment. He first pulled down the patched coarse cloth grenade bag from the body in front of him. The battle part of the 2 long-handled grenades in front of him was packed in a small canvas bag, which was connected by a rough linen strip, forming a rough carrying device, like a meteor hammer. He Wei hung the cloth strip around his neck and made a knot, which was like 2 hand grenades wrapped around his neck. The other 2 hand grenades in the waist of the squad leader's body were also not let go. He Wei took them out and put them in his belt around his waist. Then, in order to reduce his burden, He Wei spent more than 10 seconds unbuttoning the military kettle, lunchbox, dry food bag, and miscellaneous items on his back. He threw them all aside, leaving behind the Mauser shell gun box and rifle bayonet at his waist. He also took out 5 bloodless 7 or 9 rifle bridge clips from his deceased brother's bullet belt. 5 bridge clips, exactly 25 rounds of 7.92 pointed bullets. Then, He Wei pulled over the gun strap on his right side and grabbed the rifle. A dark and shiny rifle caught his eye. The genuine iron and solid wood gun hoop, straight bar, fine horizontal gauge, straight pull bolt, rifle barrel moistened with gun oil, intact straight bar and rifle bayonet stuck bamboo shoots with little wear and tear. The unique double diamond factory emblem of Gongxian Arsenal is painted above the gun barrel sleeve, and the inscription below is engraved with 3 words. Zhongzheng. This is a new gun, a Chinese official rifle, a domestically made version of the German Mauser M1924 standard rifle. It is currently the best domestically made rifle in the Chinese military and one of the few cutting-edge weapons in the Chinese military that is not inferior to the Japanese. With a gun in his hand, He Wei suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity and peace of mind. He calmed down a bit and looked at the three approaching devils in front of him, his breathing slowly stabilizing. Rubbing the butt of the center rifle, whether or not to save the life of the second emperor, it all depends on whether this rifle can compete or not. Kara Hiwei checked the safety clip at the end of the bolt and confirmed that it had been pulled to the left. He searched Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and found that the rifle was in a ready-to-fire state. The official safety clip in the middle was completely different from the automatic rifle safety clip he used in his previous life. The safety clip on this gun was made of steel, and when the bolt was pulled to the right, it was completely locked. When it was pulled to the vertical, it could retract and load, but it could not pull the trigger and could not fire. Only when the paddle is turned to the left can the entire gun be fired normally and leave the safe state. The fuse was made of real steel and iron, which was not easy to pull. Hiwei exerted a lot of effort to pull it open, then pulled the bolt of the gun, and a yellow-orange 7 or 9 light-pointed bullet flew out of the magazine in an instant, revealing an empty magazine. There was only one bullet left in the gun, and the magazine was relatively clean without much dirt. After getting familiar with the firearms, Hiwei repeatedly pushed and pulled the bolt 7 or 8 times, cleared the magazine, and quickly made several aiming movements to adapt. This rifle has a very smooth mechanism, and there is still gun oil in the magazine without any jamming. This time, the heavens were quite kind to Hiwei. The previous owner of the rifle in his hand was a very qualified soldier, and there were few nationalist soldiers who had maintained their weapons to such an extent. Unfortunately, the head of the former owner of this gun has already moved home. Hiwei loaded 5 bullets into a bridge clamp, threw away the lifted bridge clamp, and pushed the bullets into the chamber in one go. For hand grenades, 1 medium official and 1 refuting rifle, are all the life capital of Hiwei. The devils are indeed ghosts, and Hiwei estimates that they haven't figured out the situation either, so their movements are very careful. During the rush, they constantly dodged and made evasive moves, but it also delayed a lot of time. Now they are about 200 meters away from Hiwei, less than 300 meters away. Bullets whizzed past me one by one. In the Japanese army's barrage, 3 small black dots were rapidly growing larger. Chapter 3. Crossfire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a loud roar, 6 or 5 caliber Yusaka rifle bullets hit and flew towards the inch by inch where Hiwei relied to hide. Hiwei tried to play with his head lying down as much as possible. The body of the squad leader in front was really not suitable as a shooting cover. One body was too short, and even concealment was barely possible. The current urgency is to find a hiding place first. Digging a single soldier shooting bunker now. Hiwei doesn't have any geotextile tools, everything he can dig up is just a bayonet. Besides, he doesn't have time at all. Even if he were to shovel for an engineer now, it wouldn't be enough time. The area around him is flat, and Hiwei is sure that if he makes a big move, the bullet will hit him in the next second. This is a dead end. Suddenly, Hiwei turned his gaze to the left. 7 or 8 meters away from him, a brown high-quality military horse collapsed straight on the ground, fat and strong, appearing tall in the pile of corpses. The horse's head was flattened into meat patties and rotten meat, but its body was still intact. That seems to be an officer's ride on a horse. In the grassroots units below the national military camp, only the company commander, battalion commander, and battalion attaché can have it, making it an excellent individual shooting shelter. Pop pop. 2 bullets passed over Hiwei's head, causing a bloody blast of bullets to enter his nostrils. In addition to gunshots, there was also the chirping of the Japanese. Seizing the opportunity, Hiwei quickly leaned sideways and prepared for tactical rolling in. He tightened his helmet strap and gritted his teeth. Hiwei faced to the left, pressed his legs tightly together, crossed his ankles, and held the center rifle between his legs. He held the barrel of the rifle in his left hand and the lower strap of the rifle in his right hand, his whole body tense and forcefully rolling towards the left. Fight it. Damn it. He Wei exerted all his strength and rolled over the blood, flesh, and limbs on the ground. His two dark green leggings were completely dyed red. After flipping over the corpse of the horse, He Wei first took off the two hand grenades hanging around his neck, removed the shell gun box from his waist, took out the Mauser shell gun and bridge clip from the gun box, opened the nose of the machine, and pressed 10 bullets into the fixed magazine from above the magazine. Then, he combined the shell gun grip with the front part of the gun box to turn the gun box into a stock and put it aside for backup. Then he quickly took out his gun and mounted the center-forward rifle on the leather saddle in the middle of the horse corpse. He held the handguard in his left hand, grabbed the stock in his right hand, and tightened the shoulder strap, wrapping it around his left arm to stabilize the gun body. He aimed at the approaching 3 Japanese soldiers, and all his movements were almost the same as when he was training in the mercenary army in his previous life. However, in his previous life, it was training, and mistakes didn't matter. This time, if I get rid of it, my life may really be gone. The advancing Japanese army also noticed something was wrong. The 3 of them suddenly gave up evading and charged towards He Wei, instantly changing to a tactic of alternating cover. One person fired a shot to cover, while the other 2 charged forward. The 2 Japanese soldiers advancing side by side were about 150 to 60 meters away from He Wei, and the target became increasingly clear. The speed of the Japanese army's response was astonishing. Pa! As soon as He Wei reached the shooting position, the Japanese bullets followed and hit the horse corpse in front. Estimating the distance, He Wei pushed the gauge of the official rifle in his hand, pressed the gauge's vernier screw with his thumb, pushed it to a distance of 150 meters, released the screw, and embedded the vernier screw into the gauge slot, stabilized it, determined the target, sight, target, and gauge gap 3 points and 1 line, held his breath, and slowly pulled the trigger. Bang! The enormous recoil of the bolt-action rifle hit He Wei's right shoulder heavily against the stock. After a dull gunshot, a .79 rifle bullet flew out of the barrel and shot towards the rushing Japanese army. However, He Wei did not hit. The Japanese were startled and charged harder and harder. The 2 of them charged fiercely, while the other defender charged and stopped at a distance of 150 meters, desperately shooting to cover the other 2 in front. He Wei urgently pulled the bolt, withdrew the bullet, aimed again, and fired another shot, but also missed. Shooting 2 shots in a row, they all flew away. Where did they go? Only heaven knows. Pop, 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 the crisp sound of gunfire echoed one after another on the 38th floor. He Wei crouched down and fired 2 empty shots. The Japanese soldier who was covering him went crazy and shot fiercely at him. The dead horse he used as a cover was brutally whipped and shot 7 or 8 bullets, and the leather saddle on the horse's back was also smashed. Pulling the bolt, withdrawing the cartridge case, loading it, and watching the dust flying to the right from rifle shooting on the ground, He Wei suddenly cursed, "Damn it, there's wind." All the things we learned before were fed into the dog's stomach. He Wei felt that there was wind today, not very strong, but it was not small in terms of bullets, enough to affect the trajectory. Moreover, He Wei's shooting distance was far, and if he could hit it, he would have a ghost. He Wei picked up a handful of soil on the ground, released it, and all the dust flew and fell along the right side perpendicular to the rifle. Just now, He Wei was too tight and forgot about the wind deviation. Having identified the key point, just like what he learned in the mercenary army back then, He Wei murmured with his gun, "The wind direction is just right, and the wind is not very strong. It can be considered a gentle wind, perpendicular to the direction of the rifle shooting, with a crosswind to the right. A correction of 9 centimeters is needed for 200 meters, and a correction of 3 centimeters is needed for 100 meters. When there is no wind, the deviation of the bullets fired is relatively small, and the impact is not significant. However, now there is a crosswind to the right. When the crosswind blows, the trajectory of the bullets directly deviates to the right, and only when hit can there be a ghost." He Wei once again estimated the aim, adjusted the scale, and aimed at the target that had just been missed and was getting closer. However, this time, in order to correct the wind deviation, he aimed at the Japanese and the muzzle of the rifle shifted about 3 centimeters to the left. At a distance of 100 meters, with a gentle breeze, make a correction of 3 centimeters to the left. Hold your breath and pull the trigger again. Bang! The third bullet was fired, and He-Wei looked around. The ghost he had shot was left motionless on the ground by the bullet, and it was highly likely that he had been hit. Kill 1. He-Wei cheered softly, his confidence greatly increased. Pulling the bolt, withdrawing the shell, and reloading, one of the 2 Japanese soldiers who were attacking was killed. After He-Wei reloaded, the other rushed into a distance of less than 100 meters from He-Wei, and He-Wei could even see the reflection of the bayonet being illuminated by the sun. Taking advantage of the hot iron, He-Wei immediately adjusted the direction of his rifle. Now that he was close to the Japanese, he simply didn't move the scale of his rifle to lower the muzzle and fired at the Japanese army who was shooting in second place. Bang! 4th round. The second Japanese soldier fell in response, but did not die. The bullet missed the front, as if it had hit the calf. The fallen Japanese soldier couldn't bear the 7 or 9 step bullets and screamed in pain on the ground, but was quite stubborn. He didn't let go of his rifle and instead bravely raised his gun to shoot at He-Wei. He-Wei wanted to use the last bullet in his gun barrel to shoot that guy, and the injured Japanese army also wanted to shoot at He-Wei. The 2 of them almost simultaneously pulled the trigger. Bang! Bang! Neither of them fired well. The Japanese 6.5 rifle bullets missed, and He-Wei's 7.9 rifle bullets also missed the Japanese soldier's frontal body. Instead, they hit the injured Japanese soldier's wrist. However, He-Wei still has a slight advantage. With 1 shot in the calf and 1 shot in the left wrist, the Japanese army, who had been hit twice in a row in a non-critical area, lost their rifle and completely lost their combat ability. All he could do was scream in pain. On the entire battlefield, the only threat to He-Wei was the last Japanese infantry who lagged behind 100 meters to cover up. He-Wei had just reinstalled a 5-hair bridge clip and looked for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com when he saw the Japanese infantry under cover crossing over the injured and howling Japanese soldiers, bending over and rushing towards him not far in front of him. Just as He-Wei was about to shoot, the only capable Japanese soldier lay down and lay behind 2 stacked nationalist corpses, firing a shot at He-Wei. The Japanese army, like He-Wei, found a good cover. Both of them wanted to kill each other, but neither of them could do anything. The Japanese army fired at He-Wei, and He-Wei also fired at the Japanese army. After firing, the Japanese army immediately hid behind the body, and He-Wei quickly hid behind the dead horse. Pa, bang, bang, pa, so, with 1 shot from you and 1 shot from me, as long as one person shoots, the other person will return the gun, as if in a fit of anger, and no one will give up half of it. The 2 of them formed a glued shot within 100 meters. The dull sound of the Zhongzheng rifle and the crisp sound of the 38th Great Cap continued for 5 minutes, possibly because the 2 marksmen didn't want to waste any more bullets. After 5 minutes, only the mournful cries of the Japanese soldier who had injured his leg and wrist remained on the battlefield. He-Wei crouched behind the horse's belly, pulled out the bolt of the gun, pulled out a smoking rifle shell, and then shot out a bridge full of bullets. He-Wei felt a considerable pain in his arm, and the recoil generated by the full-power rifle shell during firing was not comparable to the bullets he had shot before crossing the line. He-Wei thought to himself, it's not a solution to keep dragging on like this on the battlefield. If we drag on a few more devils, I'm afraid our lives will be handed over here. We can't go on like this. After a moment of silence, He-Wei saw the 4 hand grenades and a refuting rifle beside him. He then glanced sideways at the sky and thought of a plan. Soon, He-Wei slowly put down his center-forward rifle in his hand. Chapter 4. Duel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Putting the middle official aside, He Wei shook his slightly sore right hand. He opened all 4 grenades, pulled out the fire rope, and then picked up the Zili bulge gun with a wooden box support, putting the muzzle fire on it. The bulge gun in He Wei's hand had a string of foreign codes written on it, with exquisite workmanship. Above the polished magazine, there was a 3-character inscription, "Made in Germany." This is a Mauser barge gun imported from the German factory, not a replica made in China. Its performance is much better than that of a domestically produced barge gun. However, the only drawback is that He Wei rotated the gun in his hand and found that there was no fast or slow machine on it, only a single-shot German C-96 semi-automatic barge gun. Of course, it cannot be fully automatic shooting, but this is also a good gun, an excellent weapon, which is enough to give He Wei confidence. 2 hand grenades are packed in a dual grenade bag, 2 are scattered bullets. He Wei hung the grenade bag around his neck, pinned 1 grenade in his belt, and held the other in his hand. The last row of bullets was loaded into the center rifle, but He Wei did not aim. He did not even look at the target directly, pulling the trigger with 1 hand in his left hand, the muzzle pointing forward casually, and holding a grenade in his right hand. A long minute has passed. Bang! He Wei pulled the rifle trigger and fired another shot. Pa! A few seconds later, a 6 or 5 rifle shot responded from the opposite side. Hearing the sound of gunshots from the 38th cap, in that moment, He Wei dropped his center-forward rifle, shook the wooden handle of the grenade with his right hand, and tore off the tape that stuck the grenade cover to the wooden handle with his left hand. He then unscrewed the cover, took out the copper ring that connected the firing wire inside the projectile, and quickly placed the copper ring on his right little finger. "I'm fighting with you." He Wei suddenly roared up, turned his right hand to the side, knelt, and exerted all his strength. His right arm was thrown forward, and under the force of the swing, his right little finger pulled off the pull ring. The front end of the pull cord with glass sand inside the projectile was threaded through the detonator and the firing cylinder, and the glass sand rubbed and ignited the trigger of the hand grenade. Then, the thrown hand grenade emitted green smoke and drew a beautiful arc in the air. At the same time, the Japanese soldier opposite He Wei had just finished firing and didn't even have time to withdraw his shell when he saw a grenade flying in mid-air. The seasoned Japanese soldier instinctively bent down and avoided the grenade. The grenade thrown by He Wei flew over 20 meters, creating a smoking arc in the air before falling to the ground. With a loud bang, the exploding long-handled grenade lifted a patch of dust and fine sand on the open ground, with fragments scattered everywhere. The bodies, limbs, and soil on the ground, as well as the damaged equipment, were subjected to another round of fragmentation. The grenade had just exploded, and He Wei jumped up with a barge gun in his left hand, bending down and rushing forward. When the smoke from the grenade was about to dissipate, He Wei had already eaten a mouthful of dust and charged forward for more than 30 meters against the dust. The Japanese soldier on the opposite side strictly followed the bullet avoidance criteria and remained motionless with his face pressed against the ground. Following the same procedure, He Wei threw a second-hand grenade from his waist during the charge, and immediately lay down, continuing to charge after the grenade exploded. After 2 consecutive explosions, the Japanese soldiers who were shooting at He Wei noticed a person rushing into the smoke. He suddenly realized that the Chinese soldier who was shooting at him was using hand grenades as cover for an approaching attack. He Wei and the Japanese army were less than 50 meters apart at this moment. He changed his shell gun to his right hand, and he had already thrown away 2 scattered grenades. His left hand pulled off the grenade bag hanging around his neck, and He Wei grabbed the trigger of the shell gun. He didn't even pull the string of the grenade and threw it out like a meteor hammer, continuing to charge towards the Japanese army. "Blow you up." Of course, there was dust everywhere, and the details of the grenade not being strung were not noticed by the Japanese soldiers who were shooting at He Wei. In an instant, the Japanese soldier and He Wei were eye to eye. He didn't expect that the madman in front of him would ignore charging and throwing grenades within 50 meters, still using 2 grenade bags packed together. So the Japanese soldier gave up shooting at Hiwei and chose to protect himself first, lying on the ground to avoid grenade shrapnel. Poo-poo. 2 hand grenades hit the ground heavily and landed in front of the Japanese army. However, there was no explosion. Soon, Hiwei, who was armed with a shell gun, rushed over. Bang! 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 After 4 gunshots were fired, the battlefield returned to a deathly silence. Hiwei sat paralyzed on the ground, panting heavily and running slowly towards his suffocated and dry throat, suppressing the desire to vomit. With a face full of mud and ashes, his gaze was blank and dull. After killing the devil with a refuter gun, Hiwei seemed to be disconnected and stunned, completely different from the person he was charging at. Time travel, murder, what happened in the past 10 minutes, could not have caused too much shock to the soul disguised under Hiwei's body. Only the gun in his hand and the howling of the last Japanese soldier not far away could make Hiwei feel that everything he had experienced was not a dream. The Japanese soldiers beside Hiwei were lying on the ground, motionless, with 4 extra blood holes on their backs, and blood bubbles still bubbling from the bullet holes. At the final moment of the battle, Hiwei threw 2 hand grenades loaded in a magazine without pulling the strings. He was risking his life. Fortunately, with the smoke and dust from the previous grenade still lingering, the devils didn't notice and mistakenly thought that Hiwei had lost a strung grenade, which gave him a chance to charge over. The Japanese who lay down to avoid bullets, after not feeling the explosion of the grenade for a long time, also realized that something was wrong, but it was too late. Hiwei's refuting spear had already pointed to his back and fired 4 shots in a row. After sitting for 2 or 3 minutes, Hiwei finally moved his body and looked at the corpses around him. Almost all of them were wearing the same clothes as himself. After resting for a moment and overcoming the nausea and vomiting, Hiwei flipped over the bodies of the Japanese soldiers and Yuan beside him, and for the first time, saw the image of the Japanese army up close. There are 3 cowhide bullet boxes hanging on the cowhide belt, an empty stabbing scabbard, and 2 grenades. On the head is a Type 90 steel helmet smeared with mud and soil, with canvas bags, water bottles, and gas masks hanging on both sides of the body. The woolen legs are tied to the legs with canvas straps, and the feet are wearing leather military boots with studded soles. It seems to be 1 level higher than what Hiwei has on his body. Hiwei can only handle 2 types of combat equipment. A German-made M35 steel helmet on his head and an armed belt worn by officers. The Japanese were killed by Hiwei, with his right hand still tightly holding the .38 rifle. Hiwei put in a lot of effort to break open his hand, which was full of calluses, and took the .38 large cap that was once aimed at him. Hiwei didn't let go of the things on the devils either. He dismantled the gas mask bag, belt, rifle magazine, and bayonet scabbard one by one. He roughly tore open the canvas bag and poured out a pile of fragments. There is a tin can, 7 or 8 sugar cubes, a notebook, cigarettes, a box of matches, identification documents, and a pile of messy paper debris, as well as a wrinkled edition of the Showa 12th Infantry Code. Hiwei opened the red cover of the infantry training manual and saw several lines of characters written on the first page of the manual, including both Chinese and Japanese characters. He could only recognize 2 lines. The 3rd Independent Garrison of the Guangdong Army, Chaojing Team, note, it seems to be the unit number of this Japanese soldier. Hiwei silently reassembled a pile of miscellaneous items and infantry manuals, stuffed 2 grenades, 3 leather bullet boxes, and a leather belt into the Japanese canvas bag, and carried a gas mask on himself. He also picked up the Type 38 rifle and the Japanese 90 steel helmet. He walked towards another Japanese corpse, the first one to be killed by himself, and still searched for it, taking his .38 rifle and various miscellaneous items of various sizes from his canvas bag. Hiwei stuffed his mind into the canvas bag that had just been peeled off from the Japanese, and the fragments and shoes of 2 Japanese soldiers filled a bulging bag made of Japanese canvas. He Wei tied the headband of the Japanese steel helmet to the bayonet hook of the Type 38 rifle, and the two Type 38 rifles crossed and carried each other from behind. A mixture of pain and despair echoed intermittently in He Wei's ear. The hardest fated Japanese army was still struggling in pain, and He Wei walked slowly over. He Wei missed two 79mm rifle bullets, causing him to lose his mobility. One hit the Japanese soldier's thigh and the other hit his right wrist. His wrist was directly broken by He Wei's 7.92mm full-power rifle bullet, causing his bloody hand to droop weakly. The blood flowing from his legs stained the surrounding land red. The fierce Japanese army just now lies on the ground like a dog. The injured Japanese army saw He Wei and no longer howled. They shook their heads like a tambourine and chattered incessantly. Looking for the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, they glanced at the 38 rifle a few meters away. He Wei looked at him coldly and kicked the rifle away. Touching the center-facing rifle bayonet on his right waist, He Wei drew his sword out of his sheath, approached the Japanese army, crouched down, shook his hands, and pressed the sharp tip of his sword against their chest. The Japanese army looked at He Wei with pleading eyes, as if begging for something. The tip of the knife stayed in front of the Japanese army's chest for half a minute. Suddenly, He Wei closed his eyes, his nose trembled, lowered his head, and decisively suppressed the hesitation in his heart. He Wei placed his left hand on the handle of the bayonet and pressed it hard. Poo-poo. The bayonet pierced into the flesh, and He Wei inserted it into the front chest of the Japanese army. He repeatedly twisted the handle of the bayonet, pulled it out, and blood spurted out. After the Japanese army snorted twice, there was no sound left. After solving the last Japanese soldier, He Wei continued to tidy up the miscellaneous items on the Japanese army. He Wei, carrying 338 rifles behind him, swayed to the position where he had been lying. He picked up his own dry food bags and military water bottles one by one, and put them back on his shoulder. Of course, He Wei did not miss the official rifle and also picked up two long-handled grenades and pinned them in his waist. With his things in hand, He Wei stood up and scanned the entire open area. Apart from the 3 Japanese corpses killed by He Wei, he seemed to have seen no more. Some memories and tragic scenes that belonged to He Wei's body but were somewhat unfamiliar once again came to mind. P.S. It was a custom in the Japanese army at that time to refer to a certain squadron, usually using the surname of the squadron leader to add the squadron, Ase Squadron, which means Ase Squadron. If it's the Turtle Field Team or the Pig Head Team, laughs, it generally refers to the Turtle Field Squadron and the Pig Head Squadron. The author's small details can be considered as close to historical facts as possible, but of course, it can only be as close as possible. We understand. Chapter 5. What a great heavy machine gun. I can't bear to part with it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In July of the 26th year of the Republic of China, the Japanese aggressors provoked in Beiping. North China was in danger, and the war was on the verge of breaking out, making it difficult for the Northwest Army in North China to sustain themselves alone. At the end of July, the 13th Army of the Central Army marched to North China and engaged in fierce battles with the Japanese Army at Nankou. In August, in order to reinforce the North China battlefield, the 10th Division, 83rd Division, and 85th Division of the 14th Army of the Central Army, which were stationed in Shaanxi and other places, were ordered to gather north in Zhuizhou and launch an attack on the Pingxi Mountain Road to reinforce the 13th Army in the Nankou battlefield. They engaged in a fierce battle with the Japanese army for 21 days west of Beiping, resulting in over 10,000 casualties. The Japanese army conquered Beiping, Chahar, and ravaged North China, with their troops pointing straight towards Jinbei. Shortly after retreating from the battlefield in Beiping, the heavily injured 14th Army immediately joined the Shaanxi battlefield and was ordered to participate in the Battle of Xinkou. These Chinese soldiers lying on the ground are all under the jurisdiction of the 14th Army of the National Revolutionary Army, where He is stationed, and the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment of the 28th Brigade of the 10th Division. As soon as the 14th Army arrived at Fangxingkou, the 10th Division of the 14th Army took the initiative to launch an attack. The entire 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment of the 28th Infantry Brigade was ordered to serve as the vanguard, starting from the main position of the Dabashui Pass on the west side of Xinkou, passing through Yanzhuang, and advancing towards Yongxing village in front of Yanzhuang. It was the first unit of the 14th Army to launch an attack after entering the Xinkou battlefield, serving as the main force of the division in response to the central battlefield of Xinkou. However, before the troops could reach their destination of Yongxing village or even fully deploy, they encountered a strong Japanese infantry cavalry tank mixed unit. On one side, there are pure infantry who have not even fully developed their combat formations, while on the other side, there are tanks and heavily firepower infantry and cavalry, and the nearby terrain is completely open. From the beginning, this encounter was a one-sided situation. The Japanese army first crushed and attacked the queue of the 2nd Battalion with tanks and cavalry, accompanied by dense strafing of tank guns and machine guns, followed by infantry light and heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, flat fire guns, and infantry gun firepower accumulation and pursuit. In a chaotic situation, hundreds of soldiers from the 2nd Battalion collided with steel tracks, being engulfed by fire nets and fragments. Dense fragments and dense firepower knocked them down, piercing through the bodies of the nationalist soldiers. The rampaging tanks collided and ran over the corpses of the nationalist soldiers. The outcome of the battle against tanks and artillery, with their flesh and blood, was already predetermined. The Chinese soldiers of the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment proved their bravery and fearlessness at the cost of almost the corpses of an infantry company. In the end, they were forced to retreat and withdraw to Yanzhuang in the rear. At this moment, He collided with another soul with the same name and surname among the corpses, and entered this tragic era alone. Sitting on the ground, panting heavily and almost completely exhausted, He shook off the German helmet on his head, rested, and then removed the Japanese-made 90 steel helmet from the corpse of the Japanese army. He fiddled with it a few times in his hand, which was very common in later film and television works. A steel helmet, combined with a buttocks curtain cloth hat, was a classic image of Japanese soldiers in TV dramas. This time, he finally encountered the real thing. With curiosity, He put on this Japanese steel helmet and instantly knew why Japanese soldiers still wore cloth hats when wearing helmets. The German steel helmet He wore had an 8-piece shock absorber lining made of leather and fixed with steel hoops. The craftsmanship was excellent, and there were cooling holes on both sides. The entire helmet was made of molybdenum alloy steel, weighing less than 1 kilogram, so He didn't need to wear a small cloth hat. With a bald head, he could comfortably wear the German steel helmet. But the Japanese steel helmet had only a simple 3-piece leather lining inside, which had little shock absorption effect. The helmet was directly attached to the head. If it caught up with the march, there was no need to fight, and the head would be hit by the helmet. The weight was even heavier than the German steel helmet. If it caught up with winter, wearing a bald Japanese steel helmet would probably freeze the head to death. No wonder Japanese soldiers wearing steel helmets would wear a cloth hat inside. Taking a break, He was well aware of the danger here. His troops were crushed and retreated. This open battlefield was at the forefront, full of danger. He chose to leave quickly and find his troops as soon as possible, which was his only reliance in this era. 3 .38 rifles were crossed and carried behind, with 3 Japanese-style 90 steel helmets hanging on bayonet hooks swaying left and right as He quickened his pace. He was carrying a shell gun around his waist, with 2 hand grenades inserted into his belt. He was wearing a Japanese canvas bag filled with 3 Japanese soldiers and a cowhide armed belt tightly packed with various equipment. The armed shoulder belt had a deep dent on the military uniform soaked in blood and dust on his right shoulder. With evidence of his own killing of the enemy, He scanned the surroundings again. There were corpses of his own people everywhere, scattered with various firearms, ammunition, mortar shells, and equipment. He Wei saw a dead pack horse, its head had been crushed into flesh and mud. As he approached, he saw this poor dead horse, with a brand new body of the second and fourth machine gun on its saddle. Looking at the heavy machine gun, He Wei sighed lightly and said, "It's a pity. This gun is both a new and a good one." He Wei wanted to take it away at first sight, but it was too heavy and he couldn't take it away alone. He Wei suddenly remembered a line from the protagonist Li Yunlong in the TV drama, Bright Sword, in later generations. "What a great heavy machine gun. I can't bear to part with it." Of course, unfortunately, it's not just this heavy machine gun, there are brothers who died in battle everywhere, naturally weapons everywhere. Not to mention, the riflemen among those fallen brothers carry 120 rounds of ammunition on their backs. These bullets alone add up to nearly 10,000 rounds. He Wei also regrets them. While He Wei was regretting, suddenly, a sound of footsteps came from behind. "Who?" He Wei immediately turned around and raised his official rifle. But he saw another pack horse running leisurely over. The saddle on the horse was already empty, and the pack horses in the army had been specially trained. He Wei estimated that they had just been raided and the team was disrupted by the Japanese. This horse also ran along with the people and lost its load. Now on the battlefield, it has returned to quiet. It is estimated that they came back to find their owner before walking to He Wei's place. It has to be said that you came just right. He Wei pulled the horses over, untied the saddles for this batch of horses, and then untied the specialized saddles for the load-bearing machine guns from the dead military horses. They were loaded onto this live horse, and the gun mounts and anti-aircraft guns were found separately, all of which were loaded onto the saddles of this horse. This horse has strong endurance. According to the rules, the heavy machine gun rack and anti-aircraft receiver, which were originally carried by 3 horses, were placed on its body but did not react. He Wei then touched the horse's head and poured water from the kettle into his hand to feed it. "It's a good horse. After drinking enough water, let's carry more things." After feeding half a pot of water, He Wei continued to search for equipment in the pile of corpses. There were far more equipment left on the battlefield than he had imagined, with over 100 complete corpses, all of which belonged to the Nationalist Army. In addition to the heavy machine gun that He Wei just installed, he also found a Type 24 heavy machine gun and 3 Czech light machine guns, but they were all blown out. However, He Wei also removed the barrel of the light machine gun, which was damaged. However, the barrel can still be used as a backup for good light machine guns, which cannot be wasted. In addition, there are 10 boxes of 82 mortar shells packed with 2 rounds per box. As for the official rifles, there are more than 80. In addition, there are several unopened boxes of long-handled hand grenades. He couldn't take all of these things with him. Following the principle of not leaving them to the enemy even if they were destroyed, He Wei brought all the spare barrels of the light machine gun. In addition, he tied 10 regular rifles, 10 bayonets, 10 M35 steel helmets, and 4 bullet straps pulled from the corpse together. He found a large hemp rope and fixed it on the saddle. A heavy machine gun, 3 barrels, 10 rifles, and over 200 bullets have reached the limit for this horse. As for the other equipment, it was all piled up by He Wei and placed in a crater. All mortar shells were unboxed, and hand grenades were the same. Impossible rifles and heavy machine guns were stacked together. Since these things cannot be taken away, there is no reason to stay here to support the enemy. Boom! Boom! After a series of violent explosions, He Wei crawled out of a crater and detonated mortar shells and hand grenades, causing maximum damage to the remaining equipment. Standing up, he put on a steel helmet with still blood stains, and He Wei held a center rifle. With a pair of detached 1,000-layered military cloth shoes, he walked heavily, lying over the body and crossing over the remaining limbs. Behind, the smoke that had been burning on the battlefield for a whole morning had not yet dissipated. It rose, drifted, scattered, and slowly dissipated in the air under the gentle breeze. The light and shadow scattered under the clouds filtered through the smoke and covered the remains of the Chinese soldiers who had died in battle, emitting a strange blood-colored light. The remaining flames did not dissipate, and He Wei took a step forward, crossing the bodies of his brothers in the robe. One by one, one by one, one by one, one by one, slowly blending into the distant horizon. Chapter 6. Yan Zhuang. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. A gentle breeze brushed over Zhuangzi, scattered leaves sweeping through the desolate and dilapidated land, making a rustling sound. Outside the lifeless village of Yan Zhuang, several trenches formed on the land outside the village. The trees outside the village were cut down, leaving behind empty tree stacks and a set of urgently needed field fortifications, winding around the outskirts of Zhuangzi. Groups of nationalist soldiers in groups of 3 and 2 were working like ants, using various tools to chop down the remaining few trees, cutting down their trunks, tying them with knots and leashes, and dragging them to the trench outside the village. The smoke of gunpowder spreading into the sky from afar lingers for a long time, like black clouds, oppressing the nerves of everyone outside the village. On the land outside the village, more than 100 soldiers were sweating, waving shovel and pickaxes, carrying trees, busy digging holes and ditches, digging earth and building trees, and digging trenches and bunkers as deep as people in the field. In the frontline trench outside the village, the soldiers in the first row of the 6th Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment were sweating profusely. 37 soldiers had their weapons behind them, and the official rifles, as required by the Internal Affairs regulations, were 3-pronged and tilted on the ground, with a German-made M35 steel helmet hanging from the barrel. Beside the rifle, there was a kettle, military hat, needle and thread bag, gossip pill, gun polish, wooden flat pick, military shoulder bag, missing enamel bowl, yellowed military blanket, fried rice bag, torn towel, leggings, hanging neck-style grenade bag, and a long 12-grid canvas 7.92 mm rifle bullet bag piled up haphazardly. The weather in Shaanxi in October is already slightly cold, but it doesn't matter to a group of soldiers licking blood with knives. Most of the soldiers in the 6th Platoon of the 2nd Battalion, the 57th Regiment, the 28th Brigade, the 10th Division of the 14th Army took off their grass-green uniforms, or were shirtless, or wore black, yellow and red military underwear that had not been cleaned for a long time. They could not see the true color of white military underwear. They sweated on the ground under their feet. Some military shovel dug soil with shovels, and some military pickaxes used pickaxes to dig holes. Soldiers who really did not have tools used rifles, bayonets, and bamboo strip frames filled sandbags with soil. Entering his mother's X, every time the work of digging fortifications is done by our company, and even his mother arranges for us. The donkey being pulled and ground still needs to rest. We are human, not livestock. A burly man was shirtless, with a thick calluses on his right shoulder and a Czech-style light machine gun at his feet. The patched canvas gun jacket covered most of the gun body, leaving only a wooden stock and 2 tripods supporting the ground. The big man grinned, wielding his pickaxe to hit a semicircular outline in the trench, and then replaced the shovel to shovel the soil into the bamboo frame beside him. Although his mouth was complaining, his hands were exerting great strength. Gugoe Kai, the squad leader of the black and thin sergeant class, took the bamboo frame next to the burly man and stood up to look into the distance, sighing and saying, "Qilong, bite your own tongue, knowing the pain is good." After less than 2 months of fighting, a platoon leader died, and today I threw another platoon leader in front. I don't know if it's life or death. Poor platoon leader. That student just came down from the 11th phase of the Central Military Academy a few days ago, and before the probation period passed, he had to fill the platoon leader gap. Now he's on the battlefield, life and death are unknown. Please be content. If we can live and breathe, it's God's mercy. God be merciful, let's hit the big luck in our platoon. In the morning, we walked at the end of the entire camp, without much casualties. Look at the other platoons, how many heads were broken. Guguei looked at the distant gunpowder and unconsciously rubbed the dry smoke gun inserted in his belt. After listening to Guguei's words, Jiang Qilong, a first-class light machine gun shooter in Rose, shook his head and remained silent, focusing on dealing with the machine gun positions he was digging. Humph, that Pai Chatzi with the surname, he must have been wandering around. When he met the Japanese Iron King Ba, he was actually walking at the back of the queue. The contemptuous voice came from Yang Biao, the deputy squad leader of the first class of corporal. Yang Biao pinched half a cigarette in his left hand and a folded leather belt in his right hand. His shirt was wide open and he wore a military cloth hat on the back. He used a German-made M35 steel helmet as a seat and sat under his buttocks, leaning against the trench to swallow the clouds and smoke. His eyes were not happy, and he vividly portrayed the image of a rolling knife flesh soldier. Yang Biao. Speak with a bit of conscience. Before, you stumbled on that student and the big guy didn't say anything. Now that the person is gone, you have accumulated some virtue in your mouth. The big guy knows that you used to be a brigadier general, almost hanging an armed belt and becoming an officer. You were demoted to a sergeant for 2 years and refused to accept it. But don't think that if the student is gone, you can fill the vacancy for a second lieutenant platoon leader. Even if he dies, there will still be another platoon leader coming out of the military academy. If it's not up to you, you don't know the big characters, and you can't even fight the inexperienced cargo carrying an armed belt as an officer. Work hard. The little devils are at the forefront, in a sentence. You can pounce on it with Kung Fu. Guguei threw a handful of soil at Yang Biao and scolded. After getting a handful of dirt from Guguei, Yang Biao coughed incessantly, holding a cigarette in his mouth and pulling out his bayonet. He pretended to sit on the ground and scratched with the bayonet. That's right, Captain. He is a good person. Chu Desheng, a short and chubby sergeant from the 3rd class with a bandage around his neck, agreed. After a few words, no one spoke in the trench. Not long ago, these 30.7 people had just experienced a life and death disaster. Most of the people who narrowly escaped death didn't have much nonsense and were thinking about how to survive the next battle. The old squad leader Guguei roared loudly, "The sandbags are all filled with porcelain, clear out the broken stones, this is a life-saving thing." The squatting deputy Yang Biao smacked his lips, drew a circle on the ground with a bayonet, and looked at the brothers working in the trench. Knowing it was boring, he also sheathed his knife, shouted loudly, rolled up his sleeves, and swung a pickaxe to work. More than an hour ago, the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment of the 28th Brigade of the 10th Division, where He Wei was stationed, encountered heavy casualties with the Japanese army. The entire battalion retreated to Zhuang and built positions outside Zhuang to defend on the spot. The 2nd Battalion suffered heavy casualties in the encounter with the Japanese infantry, cavalry, and tank mixed forces. The entire battalion had 3 infantry companies, the 4th Infantry Company, the 5th Infantry Company, and the 6th Infantry Company, as well as 1 heavy machine gun company and 1 82nd Mortar Platoon. The 4 company leaders and 1 platoon leader of the entire battalion died just as they collided with the Japanese army. The commander of the 4th and 5th Infantry Companies of the 2nd Battalion was killed on the spot, while the commander of the Heavy Machine Gun Company and the commander of the 6th Infantry Company belonging to a certain unlucky person surnamed He survived by chance. However, they were also bitten by bullets from the Japanese. More than 100 soldiers died in the front of the 4th and 5th Infantry Companies alone. The 10th Division had fought against the Japanese army in the border area west of Beiping for almost a month before, resulting in heavy casualties. In addition, the troops were constantly moving, and there were injured and sick soldiers on the way, so when they moved to Shinko, they were not fully staffed and their strength was not fully recovered. After such a battle, it was even worse. The 4 and 5 infantry companies, which were heavily injured and had minor injuries, only had a total of over 100 people left. Only the 6th company suffered the least casualties due to walking at the end. The 6th platoon, on the other hand, was at the end of the platoon. When the entire battalion was defeated, they received a discount and were the first platoon to run back. It can be said that they were unlucky and did not directly collide with the enemy's light and heavy firepower. The casualties were very small, with only one soldier being killed by stray bullets. So, with the least loss and a strong army, the 6th Company was ordered to dig fortifications and defend themselves on the spot, standing at the front line. However, in addition to the soldier who was killed by stray bullets, there was also a downsizing in the 1st platoon of the 6th Company, which was losing his platoon leader Hiwei. Dust was flying inside and outside the trench, and a row was missing a platoon leader. The oldest sergeant, Sergeant Gugue Kai, temporarily commanded the construction work of the entire platoon to work overtime. Gugue Kai, 34 years old, was a veteran of the 2nd Battalion. He had been in the army for more than 10 years and joined the army during the Great Revolution. He was old and well-behaved, having fought against Wu Peifu's troops in Sun Chuanfang's 5 provinces alliance. During the Jianggui War, he fought with the Guangxi army with bayonets. During the Central Plains War, he charged with the artillery fire of Yan Laozi and the heavy machine guns of the Northwest Army. During the Fujian incident, he fought hand-to-hand with the 19th Route Army, and the bodies and blood rolled over all the way. Despite his old qualifications, he was honest and respected, and he was a well-known veteran of the entire camp. Waving his shovel, Gugue Kai thought of the missing platoon leader in his heart, and looked at the 30 brothers, feeling really uncomfortable in his heart. The luck of the platoon has always been good. Some infantry platoons in the camp have died and changed for 2 rounds. However, although there were casualties in the 1st platoon, 2 platoon leaders also died one after another. Go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but no matter how you fight or make up for it, the number of people fighting so far is actually the most full and solid. The squad leaders of each class were as lifeless as gods, and the earliest group of veterans did not die. It was really unlucky, but this time, Gugue Kai made a mistake in his heart. In the battle just now, including the invisible squad leader, there were only 2 people left in the entire platoon. The 6th Company had the least casualties in the entire camp, and the 1st Company had the least casualties among the 6th Companies. On the surface, it may seem like a row of pigs has taken advantage, but even discerning people know that big trouble is coming. When the sky collapses, a tall roof will come down, and pigs will have to choose to kill the fat. Fortune and misfortune depend on each other. It is precisely because there are few deaths and the troops are basically intact that a row is arranged in the frontline trenches. The Japanese rush forward and fight hard from the front. How many troops can there be on the front line? I'm afraid these 30+ heads won't have to be reimbursed in 1 round. Also, where has the platoon leader he gone without any shadows? Having served as a soldier for so many years, Lao Gu had to worry about his own group of brothers. Although the casualties were small, he lost his platoon leader and most likely had to deploy on the front line. This battle is not easy to fight. Gugu, the platoon leader is here. The platoon leader is here. Gugue Kai was interrupted by the childish voice of a row of messenger soldiers, Tao Haiwa, and flew towards him like a flying bird. Brother Gu, the platoon leader has come over. Gugue Kai nodded to Xiao Tao, walked a few steps towards the officer behind him, put the shovel on his left hand, put his right hand across his chest, and clamped his legs together. Captain. A row of soldiers around stopped their work and stood at attention, saying hello. Hello platoon leader. Hello, chief. Hello, chief. Hello, sir. Captain. Chapter 7. Company. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the trenches, the platoon leader of the 2nd Battalion and 6th Company, surnamed Fu Mingchen, with the rank of captain, was walking with great strides. He graduated from the Nanjing Central Military Academy, also known as the Huanpu Military Academy after relocation to Nanjing, also known as the Central Military Academy, Army Officer Academy, Military Academy, with a duration of 3 years, exactly 4 years ago. A month and a half ago, he was still a lieutenant platoon leader in the 3rd row of the 6th Company. The original platoon leader of the 6th Company was an old platoon leader who graduated from the 6th phase of Huangpu, and together with the former platoon leader from the 9th phase of Huangpu in the 1st row of the 6th Company, they were hit by a Japanese shell in a tug-of-war in the western position of Beiping. After the war, the people of the 6th Company only found half of their thighs and one hand in the hidden department where the 2 of them were hiding. The old company commander died in battle, so Fu Chen took over the vacancy of the 6th Company commander and was promoted to captain. Fu Chen lifted his head and walked into a row of trenches with his waist straight. Several grooves from the war had appeared on his forehead, with bloodstains smeared around his sunken eye sockets. His right shoulder was wrapped in crimson gauze, and a telescope hung on his chest. On the face of the newly appointed company commander, there was no excitement from the new officer, only a worried and nervous expression. As Fu Chen walked, he rolled up his sleeve to his upper arm, raised his left hand, and looked at the white mark on his left wrist. He opened his mouth in frustration, reached into his military uniform pocket, and took out a watch with a worn strap. Putting back his watch, Fu Chen immediately waved at the soldiers in the row. "Brothers, everyone work hard. The devils have to come up anytime and anywhere. Hurry up. All class leaders and deputy class leaders come to me." Quickly, the 1st squad leader Guguo Kai, the 2nd squad leader Luo Yudao, the 3rd squad leader Tu Disheng, and the 3 deputy squad leaders all gathered around Fu Chen. Fu Chen withdrew his gaze and stared into the eyes of Guguo Kai and others, slowly saying, "The battalion commander needs to tally the casualties. All the officers who died in battle in each company have been identified. Our 6th Company is now in your platoon. When we were attacked by the little devils just now, did anyone among your squad leaders, deputy leaders, and soldiers in the platoon see He Wei? Was he killed by bullets or crushed to death by the devil's chariot? Just now they all dispersed, with people crowded around and no one caring about anyone. They were all running around. At the last glance, they saw our platoon leader seem to be entangled with the soldiers of the 5th Company. Many of the people of the 5th Company were killed and crushed by Goori's chariot, but I didn't see our platoon leader killed in action. Now." Guguo Kai shook his head, looking helpless. The battlefield was chaotic, and who could keep an eye on one person among hundreds of people? He Wei was shot to death. Was it bombed to death? Or was he killed by the enemy's chariot? Crush it to death. Or is it missing? Guguo Kai can't say for sure, no one can say for sure what nobody sees on the battlefield. I didn't die in action, maybe I went off guard. Class 1 Deputy Yang Biao muttered softly. Fart, go away. Guguo Kai pressed his foot against Yang Biao's buttocks and turned his head to look at Fu Chen. Captain, don't listen to his nonsense. None of us know what the platoon leader is like. Fu Chen lowered his head and didn't pay any attention to Yang Biao. He was also very angry. In the morning, the entire battalion launched an attack, but was defeated. Compared with the other 2 heavily injured infantry companies, his 6th Company was in the best condition because it had the smallest casualties at the end of the marching column. Even the 2nd and 3rd rows inside are very good, but this one alone has solved the problem. Platoon leader He Wei, an early graduate of the Huangpu 11th Infantry Division, was assigned to serve as a 2nd lieutenant trainee officer in the 6th Company shortly after. Due to the death of the original platoon leader, He Wei took over the position of platoon leader as a trainee officer in advance. The result of the first battle is that life and death are unknown, and the battlefield is missing. I don't even know where to die. To live without seeing a person, to die without seeing a corpse. Fu Chen sighed and said, "Forget it, let's let this matter go for now. We'll talk about it after today. If we can't go back and report missing, we need to be on guard. Now that there are too many casualties in the 2nd and 3rd rows, we can't draw anyone out. Captain Gu, Please take care of the first row and immediately set up 2 forward guard posts to the front. Hurry up, let's move away. To be honest with you, our battalion's proactive attack failed. The regiment received an order for our battalion to defend Zhuang on the spot. The main position of Shinko on the east side has already started to fight against the Japanese. It will be a matter of time for us here. We are at the forefront of the entire division and must be nailed to the position. Guguekai. Yes. Captain Fu Chen, the 6th platoon leader, came and went quickly. After Fu Chen left, Guguekai immediately ordered Yang Biao, the deputy squad leader of his class, and Jiang Qilong, the upper-class machine gunner, to set up guard posts. Due to the disappearance of the platoon leader, Guguekai was particularly displeased with the deputy squad leader Yang Biao today. He decided to send him to the guard post, out of sight and out of mind. Coupled with Jiang Qilong's strong physique, it was enough. The two of them put on their helmets, grabbed their weapons, and left the trench, running forward with great strides. Yang Biao and Jiang Qilong ran for more than 4 miles, surrounded by open land. They took a shovel with them and dug 2 shallow holes in the ground. They set out lightly, carrying nothing but weapons and water bottles. Machine gunner Jiang Qilong didn't take his Czech-style rifle either. Instead, he went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and took a 7.9 center forward rifle from his fellow soldier, so he worked quickly. 1 person, 1 gun, 1 pit. Both of them are not foolish. Once they are in place, they put a muzzle fire on their rifles. The task of the security guard is to buy time for the troops to warn, and as soon as they see any enemy situation, they must immediately fire their guns. Time passed by minute by second, and Yang Biao and Jiang Qilong stared fixedly ahead, refusing to let go of any flying bird. They just kept staring. Classmate, look, there's someone there. After a quarter of an hour, suddenly, Jiang Qilong seemed to see a small black spot slowly moving in front of him, sometimes and sometimes. Jiang Qilong rubbed his eyes, making sure it wasn't his own dizziness, and quickly called Yang Biao to come and see. Yang Biao is not a fake person, but he is also an old soldier. His age in the army is shorter than that of Guguekai. During the Central Plains War, he served as a soldier and had little education, but his skills in fighting were not bad among the soldiers. He used to be a lieutenant platoon leader in the 10th Division Supplementary Regiment, and it is said that he will soon be promoted to second lieutenant and become a true officer. In the army, he is commonly known as hanging an armed belt. Armed belt refers to an officer. The 10th Division is the Central Army, and the backbone of officers at all levels are mostly Huangpu regular graduates from the Central Military Academy, while non-Central Military Academy regular graduates. There are not many officers who come from the ranks of the top soldiers in the 10th Division. Like the vast majority of the Central Army, officers at all levels of the 10th Division are led by Huangpu 3rd or above, regimental leaders are mostly Huangpu 4th or above, battalion leaders are mostly Huangpu 5th or 6th graduates, and company leaders and platoon leaders are led by Huangpu 7th, Huangpu 8th, Huangpu 9th, and Huangpu 10th graduates from various periods. Yang Biao had the opportunity to be promoted to a military officer among the many officers in Huangpu, indicating that he also had some skills. However, at this critical moment when he was about to be promoted, something went wrong. Chapter 8. Mistaken Strike. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the 10th Division, a few of the big-headed soldiers who were able to wear armed belts and complete the transition from soldier to cadre status were occasionally achieved through hard work and enduring qualifications as soldiers, while also having some cultural and genuine skills, as well as interpersonal relationships. As a result, in the 25th year of the Republic of China, the 10th Division was reorganized according to the adjustment of division structure by the German military, and the supplementary regiment was disbanded. Brigadier commanders like Yang Biao, who were not considered major soldiers or true officers, were either cut to size, or transferred to other regiments or demoted and divided. The troops were reorganized, and the 10th Division Supplementary Regiment was gone. The promotion of Yang Biao to second lieutenant was also dismissed, and he couldn't even maintain his original rank as a lieutenant. He changed from a lieutenant to a sergeant, and his remaining positions were thrown to the 1st Platoon of the 6th Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 57th Regiment, where he now serves as a sergeant platoon subordinate, equivalent to a deputy platoon leader. The matter is not over yet. There is a saying that due to the leakage of the house, there may be continuous rain at night, and the ship may be delayed and encounter headwinds. Sometimes, when people are unlucky, everything happens one by one. Yang Biao served as a sergeant in the 1st Platoon for less than 2 months, and the 10th Division continued to adjust and reorganize according to the division's organization. The entire division was reorganized according to the new organization, and the sergeant platoon in each infantry platoon was cancelled. Good guy, Yang Biao's sergeant rank is also gone. There's no other way but to put him in a row of infantry squads, but the squad leaders are all there, and each platoon only has one sergeant rank vacancy, and the sergeant rank vacancy is also full. Each infantry company's 9 infantry squads have one sergeant rank vacancy in class 147, and the rest of the squad leaders are sergeants. Only the position of sergeant deputy squad leader has one vacancy. There was no other choice but to demote him to another 2 ranks, so he was thrown into Guguetsai's squad as a sergeant deputy squad leader. That's right, in just a few months, Yang Biao went from being a possible lieutenant to becoming a sergeant deputy squad leader. Having suffered such unfortunate things, Yang Biao's heart has always been unhappy. He just relied on his qualifications to act recklessly in the platoon, and naturally looked at the platoon leaders and used them as a vent. The old platoon leader who graduated from the 9th phase of the Huangpu Military Academy in the first row was not less affected, let alone He Wei, who graduated from the 11th phase of the Huangpu Military Academy not long ago and had not yet passed his probationary period. The new platoon leader who had just been temporarily promoted from the probationary officer a month ago, now in the 6th Company for more than a month, was suspicious of life. That Yang Biao bullied upon Jiang Qilong's reminder. Yang Biao fixed his gaze and exclaimed urgently, "Grandma, there's really someone here. It seems like he's alone. There's also a horse. Maybe it's a little devil, Deputy Yang, we need to shoot quickly." Jiang Qilong said urgently. Yang Biao snorted, raised the corner of his mouth, lightly supported his helmet, and picked up his rifle. "Don't worry, don't move around. If Gouri dares to come over, I'll let him have no way back. Kill this little devil, drag his Gouri's body back, and then take his horse. Maybe I'll become a platoon leader." Jiang Qilong looked at Yang Biao and held his gun, feeling that something seemed wrong. "Classmate, Captain Gu told us to fire a gun and signal when we see the Japanese." "Damn it, keep your mouth shut. I'm the classmate. Now, listen to me. If I can make up for the lack of a platoon leader, I won't treat you unfairly. This is a wealthy and prosperous person who comes knocking on your door, a living target." As the devils approached, Yang Biao loaded the bullet, held the gun, leveled it, aimed, and slowly pressed the trigger. He Wei carried all his equipment, led his horse, and walked all the way. Apart from the desolate land, he didn't even see a dog, nor did he rest on the way. Behind him were 338 large lids, a 90 steel helmet, and the miscellaneous Japanese equipment he had seized, which exhausted He Wei a lot. Moreover, he had his own equipment, a barge gun, a grenade, and a rifle in his hand. This quantity is really not light. The poor pack horse was also panting heavily at this moment. "Take a break." He Wei slowly stopped and took out the kettle from his waist. He twisted the lid and tilted his head, pouring cold water into his mouth. The thirst in his throat was relieved. "Cool." He Wei roared low. Bang! Suddenly, there was a muffled gunshot. Just as he was about to feed the horse saliva, He Wei suddenly felt a gust of wind rushing towards him. His body seemed to be hit by a heavy punch, and there was a burning pain in his left neck. The bullet pierced through his ear with a piercing sound. Ah, with a thud. He Wei leaned back and fell heavily to the ground, seeing that they had hit their target. Yang Biao and Zhuang Qilong were excited and jumped out of the hidden pit, wildly teasing the knocked-down devils. Yang Biao laughed happily. Ah! When the two of them saw the Japanese lying on the ground up close, they almost shouted at the same time. Yang Biao's laughter turned into a strange scream, and the smile on his face instantly disappeared, replaced by a look of fear. Zhuang Qilong stared blankly at He Wei, who was lying on the ground. His mouth trembled and he stuttered at Yang Biao, who was wide open and dumbfounded. Classmate, this is not ghosts. Ghosts, it's Captain He. You killed Captain He. He Wei, who was lying on the ground, had a crimson discharge from his neck. He looked at the gradually blurry sky with his eyes and murmured in a faint voice. Damn it, I was beaten by my own person. I didn't die, I think I can still grab. Save it. After He Wei finished speaking weakly, his eyes suddenly turned black, his eyelids darkened, and he fainted a moment later. Platoon leader. Platoon leader. It didn't hit the nail on the head either. The bullet brushed against the neck, so why can't it get up? Don't be scared out of hysteria, right? What platoon leader? What platoon leader? Try pouring cold water on your face. Pinch someone and slap them in the face. On the position of the 6th platoon, a row of brothers gathered together, and on the ground lay the Japanese soldiers who had just been knocked over by Yang Biao, who were brainstorming and trying to wake up the unconscious Japanese soldiers. That's right, the lying Japanese army was He Wei. After being hit by a 79 rifle bullet on his neck, He Wei collapsed to the ground, unconscious, and was carried back by Yang Biao and Zhuang Qilong, who were on guard. Now, he is lying straight on the ground, with a wound wrapped around his neck. The 38 rifles and equipment he brought back are piled up on the side, with a row of soldiers shouting whatever they want. Even if he pours 4 pots of water on his face, He Wei has no reaction. The initiator, Yang Biao, crouched in the trench, deflated his eggplant, feeling anxious. He never expected that the person who was shot down by him would be the platoon leader. Although this guy is very arrogant, when such a thing happened, Yang Biao also panicked. At first it was an accidental injury, and at last, it was a loss in the face of battle, improper investigation, and accidental injury to the officer. Platoon leader, platoon leader. Class leader Gugui Kai squatted on the ground and pushed He Wei. At first, he was happy to see He Wei come back, but now he is panicking again. The bullet that hit He Wei was clearly rubbing against his neck, and the veterans knew that this kind of injury was fine and not a big deal. However, He Wei remained unconscious and his nose was still breathing, but he didn't wake up lying on the ground. Gugu, there's no response. Class Monitor 2 Dusheng said. Did you tell the platoon leader? I let Xiao Tao go. Gugui Kai stood up, and now he was also puzzled by Master Zhang. He thought to himself that he would only find a solution after the arrival of Company Commander Fu Chen. The soldiers gathered in a circle, with most of the people in a row gathered together, causing chaos. The second squad leader, Luo Yudao, loudly cursed and dispersed the soldiers who had gathered together. They're all scattered, go to work. When you turn around, the little devil will come up and hit your head with nothing to do. If you don't want to die, be quick. A row of onlookers turned around and continued to build fortifications, leaving 3 squad leaders guarding He Wei, Gugui Kai, Tu Dusheng, and Luo Yudao with big eyes on small eyes. Looking at He Wei lying like a dead pig, and then at the 38 great covers of the 3 devils, the 3 of them are not only worried about He Wei, but also very curious about how He Wei brought back so many items and equipment from the devils. Bring back a horse. Chapter 9. Brothers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 6th Company Commander Fu Chen heard that He Wei had been brought back by someone and was not dead yet. He also brought back a horse and many weapons. He immediately took the company's messenger and ran up a row of positions with a stretcher. When he saw He Wei, who was no different from the dead, and heard Gugui Kai explain the process of He Wei's return, Fu Chen also covered his head. Is there really no injury on your body? Normally, the bullet rubbed against your neck and it was fine. How come you just didn't wake up? There's nothing wrong with other parts of your body. Captain, the brothers have carefully examined it. Platoon, he is indeed not injured and panting, but he has not woken up. Some brothers say he has developed hysteria, while others say he was scared. Fu Chen remained silent and fiercely tapped the steel helmet on his head. Let's carry it away. Bring your platoon leader into the village first, and when someone from the regiment picks up the injured soldiers, send them to the back. If you can catch your breath, there will be some help. Gugui Kai said, yes, that's all we can do. I don't know what's going on. It's better to take it to the back and have a look. Gugui Kai immediately summoned the other two squad leaders and the messenger of the company, and lifted He Wei, who was like a dead pig, onto a stretcher. He Wei didn't know how long he had slept, feeling drowsy. He slowly opened his eyes, and his last memory seemed to be that he had been shot and then lost consciousness. The glaring sunlight penetrated through his eyes, and a cold and damp sensation hit his face and chest. He Wei opened his mouth and licked the corners of his mouth with his tongue. There was no smell, it seemed like cold water. Then, He Wei suddenly froze and tugged at the wound on his neck, instantly regaining consciousness. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the 5 people looking down at him. Fu Chen, Gugui Kai, and these 5 people exchanged big and small eyes with He Wei, and for a moment, all 6 of them remained silent. Still, the 6th platoon leader Fu Chen opened his mouth and tentatively called out for He Wei's handwriting. Wei Hua, you. Are you awake? He Wei's voice was very weak. Yes, platoon. Platoon leader. He Wei is now completely awake. The inexplicable drowsiness just now seemed like a rest, and he slept deeply. After waking up, his mental state is slightly better now than when he first passed through, and his body is much more comfortable. Although he didn't have much time to sleep, it feels like he slept for a long time. Is this a side effect of just passing through? Having traveled through time, He Wei also accepted the physical memory of his predecessor and recognized his immediate superior, Company Commander Fu Chen, and the 3 squad leaders under him. In his initial trance, he involuntarily uttered the word, company leader. Captain. Captain, yes, I woke up. Wake up, it's good. Wake up, it's good. A squad leader, Gugui Kai, said as if he had been re-released, opened the remaining half of the kettle and handed it to He Wei. He Wei was not polite either, grabbed it and drank it. He poured half of the kettle into his stomach, and the cold water roared. Finally, his sticky head slowly regained its normal thinking ability. Fu Chen squatted down and looked at He Wei sitting on the stretcher. He held down He Wei's right hand, which was about to perform military salute, and said in a deep voice, "Don't be polite. Just wake up, but Wei Hua, how did you come back? And, that horse. What are those 3 or 8 big covers?" "Oh, Captain, it's like this." He Wei tried his best to organize his language and told Fu Chen the experience of the previous confrontation with the Japanese army in detail. Of course, not all of it was true. He was not a fool. If he told Fu Chen that he came from the 21st century, he probably would consider himself crazy. He Wei described his situation before crossing the river as being knocked unconscious by a shell and falling into a pile of corpses. The general situation is that when the troops retreated, He Wei was swept away by a friendly platoon, and was knocked unconscious by shelling. Then, miraculously, he killed 3 Japanese soldiers and fled back to his position. Well, everything was so logical. As He Wei spoke, Fu Chen and the others listened. However, as a platoon leader who had just graduated from a military academy and had not yet completed his probationary period, He Wei alone killed 3 Japanese soldiers and brought back a batch of abandoned weapons on the battlefield. Fu Chen didn't quite believe him, but he knew how difficult it was for Japanese soldiers to attack him. But he had to believe it, because those 338 caps and the Japanese helmet were the best proof. These Japanese items cannot be found on the open battlefield ere the 2nd Battalion was just defeated. In that battle, the entire 2nd Battalion almost did not kill a few Japanese soldiers, purely due to being defeated by Japanese firepower. Most of the soldiers from the 2nd Battalion only saw the Japanese tanks, and were hit head-on with artillery and machine gun fire. They had no contact with the Japanese infantry and the entire battalion collapsed, let alone seized anything. On the battlefield, apart from the materials and corpses left by the Nationalist Army, there is nothing left behind by the Japanese soldiers. Where can we pick up 3 complete 38 lids and equipment? And grenades. So, Fu Chen can basically confirm that He Wei was not talking nonsense, at least 7 or 8% true. Although it was exaggerated and did not necessarily kill 3 devils, it is certain that he killed 1 or 2 devils. For a 2nd lieutenant trainee who has not graduated from a military academy for a long time, even if he is boasting, it is still very impressive. Fu Chen immediately patted his leg and praised, "Wei Hua, you did a good job. You killed 3 little devils and even paid off your guns, which can be considered as a way to fight for our 2nd Battalion. However, the troops have just been shot down, and the tasks assigned by the upper peak have not been completed. You also damaged one of the company's brothers, and the company leaders of the 4th and 5th companies have also been killed in action. Hold your breath. 4 or 5 company leaders killed in action." Fu Chen nodded. Li Yinqing, the 4th platoon commander of the infantry, and Zhang Yu, the 5th platoon commander of the infantry, have all died in battle. Your brother and I are the only infantry platoon leaders in the camp. Look at my arm, I was also bitten by bullets. You're fine now, you don't seem to have any health problems. In the encounter this morning, all 4 or 5 companies were disabled, and our 6th company had the least casualties. The battalion commander asked our company to take on the defense of the main position outside the village, and your platoon has the least casualties in the entire company. So, your platoon must be at the front line, and the Japanese may counterattack anytime, anywhere. Fu Chen fixed his gaze on He Wei. You are from the 11th phase of the military academy, graduated early, and not long after joining the platoon. In theory, you haven't even completed your probationary period, and you just ran back from the front line. You stay on the front line to command your platoon. Can you handle it? Just be honest. In a word, the flesh body worn by He Wei's soul now has the same surname as his own, and his hometown happens to be the same. They are all from Shenyang, Liaoning province, a little younger than the previous life. He was born in the 4th year of the Republic of China, and this year he is just 22 years old. He was unlucky enough to wear it to a time when human life was even cheaper than dog life. So far, it's not surprising that he was completely unlucky. When he first wore it, he was surrounded by a few devils, and after saving his life, he was almost killed by his own gun. The only thing that can still be said about the past is the physical education background of this person, the 11th Infantry Department of the Central Military Academy, and the Huanpu regular student who is rooted in Miaohong. This brand is the foundation of promotion in the legitimate army, which is very affordable. Captain, I will definitely lead my brothers to the front line, no problem. Are you really okay? If you go down now, I can still have someone take you to the back and have the wounded soldiers carried by the camp to the camp headquarters. Captain, no problem. I am the platoon leader under your command. Strong generals have no weak soldiers under their command. If I go down at this time, I still have the face to see people. Of course, He Wei will not go down. He has nothing to do originally, and he understands what Captain Fu Chen means. This is just a polite gesture. If you really say that your health is not good, please withdraw. He Wei will not be in the army anymore. At the beginning of the conversation, he continued to climb along the line and gave Fu Chen a thumbs up. He Wei is not a bookworm, and his relationship with his immediate supervisor must be good. Okay. Then we'll leave the front line to you. Fu Chen smiled satisfactorily and went to find the official of Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. His favorite thing to hear was the 3 words, "no problem," spoken by his subordinates. Moreover, with the severe shortage of people in the 6th consecutive year, Fu Chen certainly didn't want He Wei to withdraw. He Wei said that even if he couldn't drive ducks to the shelves, he had to let him do it. At this moment, He Wei also stood up from the stretcher, stood at attention and saluted Fu Chen, which was the official receipt of the battle order. Build the fortifications as soon as possible, and I will ask the special agent to replenish some ammunition for you. Then, the battalion commander will apply for the transfer of heavy machine guns from the machine gun platoon to reinforce you. Thank you, Captain. Fu Chen waved his hand and said, "Can you strengthen your defense? Damn it, do you have these fragments of the devils on you? And this horse? Captain, you can take it. I scraped some miscellaneous items from the devils, which may be useful for determining the enemy's identification number. I also paid 338 caps and 2 grenades. You can also take them together." He Wei wisely handed over the confiscated Japanese equipment, items, and horses to Fu Chen. However, the situation was urgent, and Fu Chen was eager to report the enemy situation to the upper peak. He only took away the Japanese notebook ID card, the captured Japanese steel helmet, the 38 large cap, and hand grenades, and still asked He Wei to stay in the platoon himself. Even the horses brought back were only taken away by Fu Chen, along with the 24 heavy machine guns belonging to the heavy machine gun platoon. The 10 formal rifles, helmets, and the barrels of the light machine gun, which he had no time to care about, were all left with He Wei. There were many things he brought back, but in the current situation where identifying the enemy situation was the top priority, the only useful ones were the Japanese. Notebooks, identity cards, and other small things can provide the most information, but weapons are not of much use at this time. However, He Wei did not hand over all those small and miscellaneous items, such as canned goods, biscuits, candy, cigarettes, gas masks, and Japanese cowhide bullet box packaging that the Japanese had taken from him. He kept them all. Chapter 10. Laozi's team has just opened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Fu Chen left, the 3 class leaders Gugui Kai, Luo Yudao, and Tu Desheng still surrounded him. They listened to the conversation between Fu Chen and He Wei word for word, and now they all looked at him with a look that seemed like they had met He Wei for the first time. He Wei chuckled in a casual manner. What? Don't believe I killed 3 devils alone. No, the 3 class monitors said one after another. These 3 squad leaders are still good to He Wei. After the previous squad leader died in battle, except for the deputy Yang Biao and He Wei who did not pay, everyone else in this platoon was quite kind. Gugui Kai, needless to say, was calm and easy-going. He was a veteran of the Northern Expedition, in his 30s, with a long and steady military age, and was known for his prestige. The second squad leader, Luo Yudao, comes from a background in helping workers. Before joining the army, he did small business and had no major problems except for taking advantage of small benefits. The short and chubby third squad leader, Tu Desheng, is usually average and harmless to humans and animals. He always smiles at everyone he sees. He Wei generally has a good impression of them, especially the old squad leader Gugui Kai, who is indeed a good person. Now that he has just arrived here, these sergeant squad leaders seem to be good for his team. However, he still lacks understanding of the overall situation of this platoon, such as military strength, firepower, physical fitness and mental outlook of the soldiers. He Wei said, "Send the order down, reorganize the equipment in full, gather, I want to lecture." 3 minutes later, the entire platoon was assembled in the newly constructed trench, with 3 infantry squads standing in 3 rows, arranged in the order of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd squads. He Wei stood in front and carefully observed the situation of the people in this row, while the messenger Tao Sanhua followed behind him. According to the restructuring of the division in the 26th year of the Republic of China, a fully staffed infantry platoon was composed of 3 14-man infantry squads, 1 messenger, and 1 platoon leader, totaling 44 people. Among the 3 infantry squads, Guguetzai's squadron was the only standard fully staffed infantry squadron in a platoon, consisting of 14 people. Except for the squad leader and deputy squad leader, each equipped with a 79 caliber medium formal rifle, the rest were divided into a rifle group and a light machine gun group, with 7 79 caliber medium formal rifles in the rifle group, 1 light machine gun shooter in the light machine gun group, and 3 light machine gun shooters. Composed of an ammunition soldier and a rifle soldier, equipped with a 79 caliber Czech light machine gun and a center-facing rifle. However, the personnel situation of the 2nd class of Luo Yudao and the 3rd class of Tu Disheng is not as good as that of the 1st class. Due to incomplete replenishment of previous combat casualties, both classes only have 12 people, with 2 vacancies. In addition, the light machine guns of the 3rd class have also been lost due to combat damage. The 10th Division under He Wei's command was placed under the 14th Group Army in terms of combat sequence. In the previous bloody battle on the Qianjun Terrace Xiaoling Menku Go line, there were heavy casualties. This time, the entire army was in a completely broken state and went to Shinko to participate in the battle. His platoon was quite good, and some infantry platoons from other companies couldn't even fit in with 2 platoons. Looking at these soldiers again, they are all wearing M35 steel helmets. Each rifle soldier has a mid to formal rifle produced by Gongxian Arsenal, carrying 2 canvas 12-grid ammunition belts, 1 diagonally crossed and 1 tied horizontally around their waist. Each person's ammunition belt is bulging and filled with 120 rounds of 79 bullets. They have a hanging neck-style grenade belt with the nickname Huanpu Big Bra hanging on their chest, and 2 ammunition bags on each side, each hanging a long-handled grenade made by Gongxian Arsenal. The machine gunners of the light machine gun group carry Czech-style light machine guns, and the ammunition soldiers have 4 leather Czech-style light machine gun chest hooks hanging on their chests. Everyone has a standard water bottle and dry food bag hanging on their left side, a gas mask bag slanted across their right side, and a leather German-style short bayonet hanging on their belt. The backpacks, lunchboxes, and military blankets behind him are all standard equipment, with leggings on the lower body and 1,000-layer bottom cloth shoes on the feet. He Wei is quite satisfied with this military appearance. The clothing and equipment on these soldiers cannot be said to be the best in China. At least, according to He Wei's fusion memory, they must not be compared to the Central Military Academy Teaching Corps in Nanjing. The soldiers of the Teaching Corps use German imported Mauser 1924 rifles, leather bullet boxes on their bodies, and gas masks are also imported from Germany. Although He Wei's people are not as good as him, in China, but it's also at an upper level. Then, He Wei suddenly drank heavily. Take a break. The soldiers immediately stepped out to rest. Give it another move, stand at attention. Use the bayonet. With the sound of the bayonet being unsheathed, the soldiers quickly leaned back on their feet. Accompanied by the sound of the bayonet being unsheathed and the bayonet being stuck with the rifle, shiny bayonets were fired at once. The basic movements were not only neat and uniform, but also very fast, reflecting that they had received good training in their daily lives. Seeing some tricks, He Wei cleared his throat and said, "Brothers, don't talk too much nonsense. Everyone knows that our camp was attacked by the Japanese while marching towards Yongxing village this morning. I was very lucky and was knocked unconscious by a shell, but I didn't hang flowers. After waking up, I met a few Japanese soldiers who were all slaughtered by me. The matter is so simple. Now, when we gather our brothers to teach, we first need to tell everyone that as long as we listen to my command, the Japanese have nothing to fear. I just graduated from the military academy and killed several of them. Many of my brothers have been in the army for a longer time than me. I am an old man. I'm in the army now, so there's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be scared out of your wits just because you were attacked in the morning. However, if you don't follow my command, or if you have any ulterior motives in front of the enemy, don't blame the refuter gun in my hand for not showing mercy, He Wei said as his words changed and his eyes became sharp. He scanned the soldiers below. The knife-like gaze made all the soldiers feel a chill, and everyone felt that the new platoon leader seemed to have changed, especially the deputy platoon leader Yang Biao of Class 1. He used to rely on himself as an old soldier, which made He Wei feel a little angry. But on this one day, He Wei's gaze and every word he said made him a little scared. As the fire approached, He Wei waved his hand and said, "Let's go, let's continue building the fortifications. A few squad leaders and deputy squad leaders will come over." The soldiers immediately disbanded, and several squad leaders and deputy squad leaders came over and slapped each other. Sweet dates should also be given, and He Wei reached into his pocket and took out 2.5 packs of cigarettes that had been handed over from the Japanese. He put the open half pack in his shoulder pocket and handed over the other 2 boxes. Although He Wei does not smoke, cigarettes can be of great use in the military. I got some cigarettes from Goori's body, and the digging work was hard. These 2 whole packs are scattered for the brothers. Okay, platoon leader, let's just leave after finishing the work. This is a good thing, the little devil Zhuang brand cigarette. Class monitor Luo Yudeo's eyes gleamed as he snatched a cigarette box from He Wei's hand with a swoosh. 3 squad leaders held cigarettes and continued to urge the soldiers of each class to build fortifications. He Wei also jumped into the trench, and a row of 16-year-old messenger Tao Haiwa followed behind He Wei's buttocks, helping him carry a mid-range rifle, gas mask, and shoulder bag, with Japanese candy that He Wei had just given him in his mouth, smiling brightly. Work! Work! He Wei grabbed the shovel and shouted twice. He was walking to the corner of the trench when he saw a man squatting in the trench, doing nothing. At first, he saw that it was Yang Biao, a teammate who was against him. Yang Biao met He Wei face to face, his eyes dodging, and he wanted to speak but then held back. He felt that He Wei had come back clearly different from before. For some reason, when he met He Wei's sharp and murderous eyes, Yang Biao was blocked in his throat, and even a little hairy. Plus, Yang Biao just shot He Wei, although it was an accidental injury, it was still a bit unfair. The 7 or 9 step bullets fired from the center of gravity rifle, 1 inch further off, would result in He Wei being shot through the neck. Since He Wei was assigned to a row of interns, Yang Biao has repeatedly made things difficult for him. The 2 of them are very difficult to deal with. Don't mention He Wei, the last platoon leader who was already killed in battle was also bullied by Yang Biao. He is simply a public enemy of the platoon leader. It can be said that this guy has poured the anger of not being promoted to officer but demoted onto the platoon leader, and he can also be called deeply resentful. It's actually a mortal enemy. If He Wei takes the opportunity to take advantage of the incident of the accidental attack, catches it and retaliates, turning the previous accidental attack into intentional shooting of an officer and causing trouble, Yang Biao knows he probably won't have any good fruit to eat. Yang Biao may be rough, but he is not 205. If the conflict between a second lieutenant officer and a sergeant gets big, as long as he is not a fool, he knows who will suffer in the end. You fired a good shot, but it was a bit off target. He Wei pointed to the crimson wound on his neck, with a tone that was neither cold nor warm, making it hard to tell his attitude. His eyes gleamed coldly as he looked at Yang Biao, then took out the half pack of cigarettes from his shoulder pocket and threw one. Japanese cigarettes, smoke one after finishing your work. Yang Biao glanced at He Wei, left and right, his face flushed. The military ruffian, who had always been domineering, was now embarrassed and speechless. Ah! He Wei had no intention of meddling in the trouble with Yang Biao. He killed the Japanese soldiers and inexplicably came to this year. He adapted quickly, and if he did, he would fight. In my past life, I was also a soldier, so there's nothing to say. This is the end of the matter, only 2 words. Battle. He Wei was non-committal and walked sideways past Yang Biao. As the saying goes, he threw a piece of Japanese sugar into his mouth with 3 points of effort. After adding a little sugar, he rolled up his sleeves, waved a shovel, dug a trench, and merged with a row of 37 brothers, immersed in flying sand and dust.